The plot sat at the edge of her uncle's property, like a scar. 3 acres of dirt that had been farmed to death and then abandoned, grey-brown and compacted. The kind of ground that rain beaded off instead of soaking in. The kind that grew nothing but the despair of a man who'd been told, years back, that some ground just dies, and you have to accept it. Uncle Martin had been ready to sell it for development when he passed it to Iris Vance, instead of to the cousins who'd wanted to flip it. Iris was 17 and had just finished her junior year and was supposed to be thinking about college. But Uncle Martin had left her the 3 acres in his will with a note that said, "You were always the one who listened." The cousins laughed when the will was read. The neighbours laughed when Iris showed up with a shovel and a wheelbarrow and a look on her face that said she actually meant to do something with dead ground. And her mother, Patricia, who worked 2 jobs and was already stretched thin with worry, sat Iris down one evening and asked, plain, whether the girl understood that you couldn't make money on dirt that had already failed. "I'm not trying to make money," Iris said. "I'm trying to listen." Patricia had given up explaining after that, because what Iris's uncle had understood, and what Iris had understood since she was small, was that her grandmother, Martin's mother, a woman named Ruth, who'd been a farmer before she was anything else, had taught Iris the thing nobody else on that road knew how to do, which was to hear what ground was actually saying. Ruth had died when Iris was 12, but she'd spent the years before that taking her granddaughter out to her own small plots and teaching her to read soil the way you read a face. Ruth would kneel down and dig her fingers into the earth and bring up a handful and smell it and feel it and listen to what it was telling her. "Smell that?" Ruth would say. "That's life. That's bacteria working. When you stop smelling that, the ground is dying. When you smell it strong, the ground is waking up." She taught Iris to keep records, not crop yields or planting dates, but the invisible things. The day the first earthworm came back, the smell of the soil after rain, the colour shift from grey to brown as life returned, the texture change from hard to crumbly as the structure rebuilt. Ruth had notebooks full of this, 20 years of observation written in a careful hand. And when she died, she'd left them to Iris with the same note Uncle Martin would later leave. "You were always the one who listened." So Iris had her grandmother's notebooks and a dead plot of land and the certainty that nobody on that road understood what she was about to do, because nobody on that road had learned to listen the way Ruth had taught her. The work started in March, when the ground was still hard from winter. Iris didn't buy fertilizer or chemicals. Instead, she bought compost, yards and yards of it, from a mushroom operation 2 counties over, and she and Patricia hauled it in a borrowed truck, and Iris spread it across the dead ground. Not ploughed in, just laid on top, letting it sit. The neighbours watched and shook their heads. "She's making a mulch pile," Dale Rutherford said from his truck. "That ground needs to be turned, needs chemicals, needs drainage tiling if it's going to be any good." "She's 17, his wife Sarah said. "Leave her alone." But leaving her alone wasn't what the road did. Iris would show up every morning at dawn with her grandmother's notebooks and a small shovel, and she'd dig a small pit in different places across the plot, and she'd examine the soil and smell it and write things down in the margin of Ruth's pages. The compaction depth, the smell quotient, the presence or absence of visible life. And slowly, imperceptibly, things changed. The first earthworm appeared in late April. Iris noted it. First vermiculation sign. Ground beginning to accept water. 1 earthworm became 5. 5 became dozens. By June, the soil was dark enough that Iris could see the colour shift her grandmother's notebooks described as the return. She wasn't planting anything yet. Everyone expected her to plant. She was just feeding the ground and watching what the ground was doing in response. The setback came in July, in the form of her mother's worry and her uncle's medical bills, and the property taxes that were due, and the neighbours' increasing certainty that the girl was wasting everyone's time, especially her own. Iris, her mother said one evening, looking at the bills spread on the kitchen table. I need you to be realistic. This isn't working. The ground isn't producing. You're not making money. And I can't support a farming experiment while I'm already supporting us. She said it gently, but she said it. Maybe this isn't your thing. Maybe you should focus on school, on college, on something that's going to work out. Iris looked at the bills and at her mother's tired face and at the calendar that showed less than a year left before the property taxes came due again, and she understood, for the first time, what the real cost of farming was. It wasn't the work. It was the patience to keep working when everyone around you, including the person paying the bills, had stopped believing in the work. That night she sat alone in her room with her grandmother's notebooks and read Ruth's entries from 40 years back, when Ruth had started her own depleted plot, and Ruth had written, in the margin of a particularly dark night, the hardest part isn't the work. It's the year when nobody can see what you're doing but you. You just have to believe the ground knows. You just have to believe it's listening back. Iris understood, reading that her grandmother had faced this exact moment, doubt, money, the weight of other people's skepticism, and had kept going anyway. And if Ruth had kept going, then Iris could keep going too. So she didn't plant. Not yet. She bought more compost. She spread more of it. She started a cover crop in a small corner, buckwheat and clover, things that would feed the soil. And she kept walking the rows at dawn and keeping her records, and she stopped trying to explain to her mother why she was doing it, because some things couldn't be explained until they were proven. By September, 3 months before the property taxes came due again, the plot looked different. It was still not a crop. It was still just earth that looked slightly less dead than it had been. But the smell had changed. The texture had changed. The earthworm count had gone from dozens to hundreds, and in her notebook, Iris recorded the day she could kneel on the ground and feel it give slightly under her knees, the first sign that the soil structure was coming back. That compacted clay was beginning to remember how to be permeable, how to breathe. October came, and Iris planted. Not everything, just a test plot. A section in the middle where she'd been most aggressive with the compost and the cover crop, where she could feel the change most clearly. She planted winter greens, kale, spinach, chard, things that would grow fast and prove, one way or another, whether the invisible work she'd done had actually changed anything. The neighbors watched her plant and they stopped laughing, because there was something in the way she was doing it. Not the frantic urgency of someone trying to salvage a bad investment, but the quiet certainty of someone who already knew what was coming. And they had no idea why. November through December, she tended the greens. The cold came, the snow came, the grey months that made every farmer on that road question whether they'd made the right choices. And Iris kept walking the rows, even in the snow, even when nobody else would go near the fields. She kept her records. She noted the day the first greens came up through the top dressing of compost. She noted the colour deepening as the cold set them. She noted the smell, still strong, still alive, even as everything else on the road went dormant. And in January, she harvested. The greens came up heavy, thick, vibrant, dark green, in a way that made the kale from conventional farms look pale and thin. Iris harvested by hand, careful not to damage anything, filling bucket after bucket. And when she was done, she had 40 pounds of the highest quality greens anyone on that road had ever seen. She brought them to the farmer's market. She didn't make a speech. She didn't brag. She just set them out on a table with a small sign that said, soil fed, regenerated ground, winter kale and spinach. The market sold out in 2 hours, and the people who bought them came back the next week asking if she had more, and the next week asking if she could grow more, and within a month Iris had contracts with 3 restaurants and a standing order at the farmers' co-op. The reckoning came when Dale Rutherford stopped by the property in late January. after his wife had served Iris's kale at a dinner party, and he'd tasted it and been unable to stop talking about it. "I was wrong," Dale said, standing at the edge of the plot, looking at the test section where everything was still alive and growing even in the frozen ground. "I thought you were making a mistake. I thought the ground was dead and you were wasting your time." "The ground wasn't dead," Iris said. "It was sleeping. It just needed someone to wake it up carefully." "How'd you know?" Dale asked. "How'd you know this would work?" Iris thought about Ruth, about the notebooks, about standing alone in the snow, keeping records that nobody else could see the point of. "My grandmother taught me," she said. "She taught me that soil is alive, that if you listen to it and feed it what it needs, it'll tell you when it's ready to grow again." Nobody on this road listened to her either. But she was right. Dale nodded, and he looked like a man who'd been taught something that would stick with him, because he'd seen the proof of it standing in front of him, alive and green and impossible to deny. The coda by spring, Iris had expanded the initial test plot to a full acre of greens, and she'd started amending the second 2 acres with the same care, the same patience, the same invisible work that nobody could see until it suddenly showed itself in the thickness of the leaves and the depth of the green. She had orders from 5 restaurants now, a standing contract with the co-op, and a waiting list of farmers who wanted to learn what she was doing. She didn't go to college, not because she wasn't smart enough, she was offered scholarships, but because the farm needed her, and because she understood now what Ruth had understood, which was that some knowledge couldn't be learned in a classroom, only in the ground, only through the years of keeping records of invisible things, only through the patience to listen. Her mother stopped worrying, or at least she stopped saying she was worried, because the property taxes got paid, and then there was money left over, and Iris was making a living doing something that mattered to her, tending ground that had been written off as dead, and bringing it back to life through work that looked soft but was harder than anyone who hadn't done it could understand. And Iris kept Ruth's notebooks on the shelf by the kitchen window, and she added to them every season, and someday she'd pass them to someone else who knew how to listen. Someone who understood that the hardest work in farming wasn't the ploughing or the harvesting, it was the year when nobody could see what you were doing but you. When the only proof you had that the ground was changing was the smell in your fingers, and the colour shift in the soil, and the return of the earthworms that meant life was coming back. Every morning at dawn, Iris still walked her rows. Every evening she still wrote in the notebooks. Every day she knelt in the dirt and listened to what it was telling her. And every harvest she proved that the girl who talked to her soil, the girl everyone had laughed at, the girl who treated dirt like it had feelings, maybe she had. And maybe that was the whole point. Because the ground does have feelings, in the way that living things have feelings, and if you're willing to listen for them, you can hear them. And if you can hear them, you can heal things everyone else had written off as dead. The hardest part isn't the work. It's the year when nobody can see what you're doing but you. You just have to believe the ground knows. You just have to believe it's listening back. Ruth had been right, and Iris had listened. And the soil, given time and care and the patience of a girl who understood her grandmother's language, had listened back. If you've ever done invisible work for a year while everyone around you said it was pointless, and lived to see it prove itself, tell us about it in the comments. We read them all. The moral runs as deep as soil that's been starved and brought back to life. The work that looks soft is often the hardest work there is. And the things we treat with care and attention, even the things everyone says are dead, often respond by coming back alive in ways that prove everyone wrong. Tell us where you're listening from tonight and about the person who taught you to listen to things other people couldn't hear. If Iris's dawn walks meant something to you, share it with someone who's been told the ground they're tending is too far gone. And whatever depleted thing you're trying to bring back to life right now, may you have the patience to keep listening when nobody else believes. May the invisible work pay off in green shoots nobody expected, and may you live to harvest proof that the softest hands sometimes do the strongest work.